Welcome in, everyone, ready for a fascinating deep dive. Today we're looking at Osho's thoughts on, well, thought purification.
Thought purification, huh? Sounds intense.
It can be. We're working with one of his spoken discourses, kind of like listening in on one of his talks to his followers.
Those are really something. You get a sense of the energy in the room, like you're right there with them.
Totally. And he's known for this really captivating storytelling style. We'll definitely get a taste of that today. He brings up figures like Gandhi, even a thief, actually. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
Let's save the good stuff for later.
Exactly. But by the end of this deep dive, you should have a good grasp of how Osho approaches purifying your thoughts.
Sounds like a plan.
Plus, we'll look at how this affects your actions, and you'll even get some tips on how to put these teachings into practice.
So we're covering a lot of ground today.
We are. But Osho tackles this in layers, 3 to be exact.
3 layers, huh?
Yep. He starts with the body, which we'll skip today, then dives into the mind, which is our focus, and finally, purifying the feelings.
Skipping the gym and jumping right to the mind then.
I suppose you could say that. But, the gym is important too. What's interesting is how these layers influence each other.
Influence each other, how so?
Osho points out that when your thoughts are purified, your actions naturally become purer as well. And that leads to a more peaceful, joyful life. It's a chain reaction.
One change leads into the next. I like that. It reminds me of decluttering. When you clean up your physical space, it kind of clears your mind too.
I see what you mean. One affects the other. Which brings me to that third layer, the feelings. Is that something we'll unpack later on?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely something to explore. But for now, let's stick with the thoughts.
All right, thoughts it is. But even within this one layer, Osho talks about 2 types of purification. He calls them outer and inner purification. Any guesses what he means?
Outer and inner purification. Maybe outer is about getting rid of impurities, bad habits, those kinds of things.
You're on the right track. It's like shedding those negative thoughts and behaviors, the stuff that doesn't serve you anymore.
Okay, makes sense. So then inner purification goes even deeper.
Exactly. It's about getting to a state of complete emptiness. A clean slate, you could say.
A clean slate. Wow, that's powerful. But before we get to purifying, we need to figure out what Osho considers impure thoughts in the first place. And this is where his storytelling really shines. He uses this analogy of a king and his minister watching ships.
Oh, yeah, the one with the 3 ships, right. I've heard that one. It's so memorable.
It definitely sticks with you. The king sees all these ships coming and going, and he asks, "How many ships do you see?" The minister, he replies, "If you seek the truth, you'll only see 3. The ship of wealth, the ship of fame, and the ship of sex."
And the king is probably thinking, what is this guy talking about?
Right, he sees way more than 3 ships. But the minister, he points out that those 3 ships, they represent all the other ships. They're all variations on those same themes.
That must have really challenged the king's perspective.
Absolutely. And Osho uses this to show that wealth, fame, and sex, those are the central points of all impure thoughts. Dishonesty, cheating, jealousy, they're just offshoots.
So it all boils down to those 3. That's pretty thought-provoking.
It is. It makes you look at your own thoughts and ask yourself, what's my mind constantly returning to? What are my ships, so to speak?
Makes you wonder if you're chasing fleeting desires or something deeper, right? What about you? Do you see those 3 ships in your own life?
Oh, absolutely. I think we all do, in one way or another. It's a good reminder to check those underlying motivations behind our thoughts and actions.
It is. But if those are the impure thoughts, then what are we striving for? What does Osho consider pure thoughts?
That's where the concept of Satyam Shivam Sundaram comes in.
Ah, yes. I've heard of that.
It's Sanskrit. It translates to truth, goodness, and beauty. And Osho argues that those 3, those are the foundation of all pure thought.
So it's not just about avoiding the bad stuff. It's about actively cultivating the good stuff. Makes you think, how much time do we actually spend contemplating truth, goodness, and beauty? Are those the ships pulling into our harbor? Or are we still stuck on the other 3?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. And Osho says there's a key difference between those 2 types of thoughts. He says impure thoughts, they pull us outwards, away from ourselves, towards those material things and pleasures.
A downward spiral, almost.
You could say that. It's all about getting more, seeking validation from outside. But pure thoughts, they lead us inwards, closer to our true nature.
Upward, towards enlightenment.
Exactly, an upward climb. It's about understanding ourselves and the world around us on a deeper level.
Like that saying, as within, so without. If we cultivate those inner qualities, wouldn't that naturally lead to a more fulfilling and beautiful life on the outside?
That's a really interesting connection. And it brings us to the next point, how these thoughts show up in our actions. Osho shares a couple of stories about Gandhi that really illustrate this idea.
Oh, I love a good Gandhi story.
Me too. So what did Gandhi do?
Well, this first one takes place while he's in prison. Gandhi was a big advocate for aparigraha.
Aparigraha.
It's the idea of non-possession, letting go of material attachments. So while he's in prison, he decides to apply this to his breakfast. He used to eat 10 dates every morning.
10 dates. Wow. So no more morning dates for Gandhi.
Not quite. But as he's thinking about non-possession, he has this realization. He goes from eating 10 dates to being content with 5.
So just by thinking about it, his desires changed. That's powerful.
It is. It shows how our thoughts influence our actions, even in small things. There's another story Osho shares about Gandhi that really drives this point home. This one involves Gandhi's concern about, get this, harming microorganisms with escaping steam.
Wait, he was worried about the steam from his tea kettle hurting bacteria.
I know, right? Sounds a little out there. But it shows how deep Gandhi's thoughts went, how they touched every part of his life. Even boiling water, he's thinking about the impact on tiny creatures.
Wow, that puts things into perspective. It's like that ripple effect we talked about earlier. Thoughts become actions, and those actions impact the world.
Exactly. Our thoughts have real consequences. So if we want a more peaceful, compassionate world, we need to start by purifying those thoughts. Now, Osho isn't saying we should just try to stop thinking about wealth or fame. It's more about redirecting that energy.
So instead of fighting those impure thoughts, we shift our focus to truth, goodness, beauty.
Yes. He says, as you cultivate those pure thoughts, the impure ones fade away, like switching from a dim light to a bright one. You don't need to turn off the dim light. It just becomes less noticeable.
I like that analogy. Feels a lot easier than wrestling with every negative thought.
Right. It's about creating a more positive mental space.
Right.
Now, Osho has an interesting take on where thoughts come from. He says they all originate externally.
Externally, you mean we're not making these thoughts up ourselves?
That's what he says. They come from the world around us, our senses, our interactions, everything we're exposed to. But here's the interesting part. He believes we can choose which thoughts we let in. We're like gatekeepers of our own minds.
Like we wouldn't let someone dump trash in our homes, but we let all sorts of mental trash into our minds. What kind of mental trash are we letting in? That's a question we should all be asking.
It is a good question. What messages are we taking in from the news, social media, people around us? Are they helping us, or are they polluting our mental space?
So it's about being aware, noticing those thoughts as they come in, and deciding if we want to engage with them or let them go.
Mindfulness is key. Osho talks about a few practices that can help purify our thoughts. One is satsang.
Satsang.
It means being in the company of truth or goodness. The idea is the people we surround ourselves with, they influence our thoughts.
Makes sense. Spend time with negative people, you'll probably start thinking more negatively. Surround yourself with positive people, you'll feel more uplifted.
Exactly. Osho compares it to a dim lamp being rekindled by a burning one. Our thoughts can be purified by connecting with people and environments that radiate positivity and wisdom.
I love that. So it's not just about the people, it's about the places we go to, like spending time in nature that can really clear your mind.
Absolutely. Nature has a calming, grounding effect. And Osho says we shouldn't just focus on those historical figures in scriptures, the dead. We should seek out the logged truth in our everyday experiences.
So don't just read about Gandhi, go out and do something kind for someone.
Exactly. Be open to learning from anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
Wisdom can pop up in the most unexpected places. He tells this story about Raja Babu, a businessman. He's walking through his village and overhears this woman telling her child, Raja Babu, wake up, it's morning.
And those words had an impact on him.
A huge impact. Raja Babu realized he'd been sleepwalking through life, neglecting his spiritual side. That simple phrase was like a wake-up call.
So truth can appear anywhere, we just have to be paying attention. It reminds me of something else Osho talked about, the importance of hope and persistence, even when things are tough. He used a kind of funny example to illustrate this, a thief.
Oh yeah, the story of the persistent thief. It's about this fakir who sees a thief trying to break into a house night after night. The thief keeps failing, but he never gives up.
What did the fakir learn from that?
He realized that if a thief can be that determined to get something material, how much more should we, as spiritual seekers, persist in our search for truth and enlightenment? The thief's persistence, even with all those setbacks, it's inspiring.
I like that. It's easy to get discouraged on our spiritual paths, but that story reminds us that we can overcome anything with enough commitment. So we've talked about satsang, nature, finding truth in unexpected places, and even the persistence of a thief. Anything else Osho highlights when it comes to purifying our thoughts?
One thing he brings up that I find really interesting is that even if we don't always know for sure what's truly good or true, the very act of striving, of seeking, that's what matters. It's the intention, the commitment to the process, not necessarily reaching some perfect state of purity.
So it's not about being perfect, it's about trying to be better.
Exactly. Osho says that if we keep thinking about truth, goodness, and beauty, we'll naturally move closer to them, even if the path isn't always clear. He also talks about being aware of how our thoughts make us feel. Ask yourself, does this thought bring me peace? Or does it agitate me? Does it align with my values? Or is it leading me down a negative path?
So we need to be more discerning about the thoughts we entertain. Not judging them, just noticing how they affect us.
Right. It's about developing that inner awareness. And it's not about suppressing or denying those thoughts. It's about choosing which ones to engage with and which ones to let go of, like watching clouds drift by.
I like that. We don't need to cling to every thought. We can just observe them and let them pass.
Exactly. And it all comes back to mindfulness. That awareness is crucial for purifying the mind. Osho suggests taking a pause before we speak or act, just to check in with the thoughts behind our actions.
Take a breath and ask, why am I doing this? What's motivating me?
And he says this doesn't have to be some big thing. It's about bringing that awareness to even the smallest actions. How we talk to a stranger, how we handle a difficult situation, how we spend our free time.
Being more intentional in everything we do, realizing that our thoughts shape our reality.
Exactly. That's at the heart of Osho's teachings, empowering ourselves to make choices that align with our values.
So we've covered a lot. Satsang, the power of nature, seeking truth in unexpected places, developing awareness, and even that thief story. Anything else from Osho on purifying the mind?
One last thing he mentions is that different people might resonate with different paths to purification. Some might connect with the pursuit of truth, others with acts of goodness, or the appreciation of beauty.
So find what works for you, what feels right.
Exactly. And he reassures us that even if we focus on just one of those aspects, truth, goodness, or beauty, the others will naturally unfold as well, like a flower blossoming.
Beautiful analogy. It means our journey to purify the mind isn't about reaching some standard of perfection. It's about allowing ourselves to grow in our own unique way.
And that's what I find so powerful about Osho. He doesn't give a one-size-fits-all approach. He encourages us to find our own path.
He gives us permission to explore and experiment, which makes his teachings really relevant to everyone. All right, we've talked about a lot today. Let's recap for our listeners all the key takeaways about purifying thoughts. Okay, so we talked about those three main ships, remember? Wealth, fame, and sex. Osho calls those the impure thoughts. But instead of trying to, force them out, we shift our focus to the pure thoughts, the truth, goodness, and beauty.
Right, and those are just labels, right? It's not about being perfectly pure. It's more about constantly trying to bring those qualities into our lives.
And we talked about different ways to cultivate that purity. Satsang, spending time in nature, looking for that living truth all around us. And we talk about how even small actions, like Gandhi changing his breakfast, can show real inner growth.
Yeah, like changing what you eat for breakfast could be a sign of spiritual growth. Kind of wild when you think about it.
Yeah.
And it all ties back to how our thoughts, actions, and the world, they all connect.
That ripple effect. We also talked about becoming like guardians of our minds. We can choose which thoughts we let in, and we can learn from anywhere, even a thief. Remember that story?
Oh, yeah, that was a good one. Reminds us that challenges are going to happen. But if we stick to those higher ideals, we can get through them.
We also talked about being aware of our thoughts, how they make us feel, asking, does this thought bring me peace or stress? Does it match my values? Or is it taking me down a negative path?
It's like noticing those thought patterns without judging them. Then you can choose which ones to focus on and which ones to let go. Just let them float by like clouds.
Exactly. And ultimately, it's about finding what works for you, whether it's truth, goodness, beauty, or all three. But the real point is the journey itself. It's that constant effort to align our thoughts with what we truly want. So the big question for our listener is, why does any of this matter? What's the point of it all?
That's a great question. I think Osho gives a pretty practical answer. When we purify our thoughts, we're not just chasing some far-off spiritual goal. We're actually trying to live a better life right now.
So it's not just about enlightenment, it's about being happier now.
Yeah, Exactly. If our minds are full of negativity, fear, worry, that's what we'll experience in our lives. More stress, more anxiety, more conflict. But when we focus on truth, goodness, and beauty, we naturally start to experience more peace, joy, and connection in our everyday life.
It's about letting go of all that negativity that holds us back and opening ourselves up to new possibilities.
And I think, most importantly, it's about connecting with who we really are. Osho believed that underneath all those thoughts, there's this source of pure awareness, love, wisdom. And by purifying our thoughts, we can tap into that and let it guide us.
That's a great way to put it. It's like we're clearing away all the clutter to find the light that's already inside us. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought from Osho. He says every moment is a choice. We can dwell in negativity or we can choose positivity, cling to fear and doubt, or embrace hope and possibility.
And those everyday choices, they really do add up.
So what's one small step you can take today to start purifying your thoughts? Maybe it's taking a minute to appreciate what you're grateful for, talking to someone who inspires you, or just going for a walk and noticing the beauty around you.
Whatever feels right for you, remember this is a journey, not a destination. Be patient with yourself, celebrate how far you've come, and know that even small steps can make a big difference.
Maybe those small steps will lead you to a whole new world of peace and happiness within yourself. Until next time, happy exploring.
May your thoughts be pure and your journey be filled with light.
And we'll be back soon with another deep dive. This time, we're tackling that third layer of purification, emotions. So stay tuned, there's always more to discover.
Please like, share and subscribe.